afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live panel on eco-design and circularity within the cosmetics and beauty market. It is fantastic to have you here, and we very much hope that you enjoy this afternoon's session. So my name is Lorraine Dahlmeyer. I'm the CEO of Formula Botanica, the online organic cosmetic formulation school, and I'm also a chartered environmentalist. So I am thrilled to be moderating this session for you this afternoon and thrilled to hear from our amazing panelists. So we've got an hour. We're going to be here for an hour. We've got lots of questions to cover and lots of debate to have between all of us. But we're going to start off with some introductions, and I'd like to introduce our amazing, or ask our amazing panel to introduce themselves to you. So I'm going to go to the first person on my screen, and that's Paolo from Cosmos. So Paolo, could you please introduce yourself for all of the watchers?
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine. I'm Paolo. I'm the Non-Food Certification Manager at ICEA, which is the Institute for Ethical and Environmental Certification, a certification body that is a founding member of Cosmos. Cosmos is surely one of the most international, well-known standard for cosmetics, and it was established by several organizations that had their own national standard, decided to join efforts and to work together in order to have an harmonized international standards. And that is good for the industry and I think good for the consumer as well.
Fantastic. Wonderful to have you with us this afternoon. So the next person I'm going to move to for introductions on my screen is Jordi, who is in Barcelona today, I believe. So could you please introduce yourself to all of us?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Lorraine. Yes, indeed, I'm in Barcelona. I'm based in Barcelona. I'm the CEO of Inedit, which is a consultancy that works on circular economy, eco-design, coming along with companies that want to include sustainability in the way they do things, and the way they do their business. And particularly, the beauty sector and cosmetics is a growing sector on this regard.
Fantastic. Well, it's wonderful to have you with us as well. So the next person on my screen is Emma from True Skincare. So Emma, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone watching?
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Emma Thornton. I'm the founder and owner of a British brand called True Skincare. My background was centered around the premium beauty industry. So I used to lead the marketing for a number of high price point, high profile brands. So it was this experience which gave me an insight into how much it actually costs to make these products, how much water was going into them, and how little legislation there is when it comes to making natural and organic beauty claims. So from this, I decided to start my own skincare brand where no compromise was made. So everything within the True Skincare range is certified organic, vegan friendly, natural, made in the UK, Leaping Bunny approved by Cruelty Free International, and waterless in formulation, whilst remaining accessible with regards to both availability and price without compromising on elegance or efficacy.
Fantastic. So you can see we've got an amazing panel here for you this afternoon. We are supposed to be joined by Anna Brightman from Upcircle Beauty as well. So she may still be able to dip in, hopefully, and she may suddenly turn up during the panel. So we'll see if she can join us. But in the meantime, I'd like to get started because we have a lot of ground to cover. So I think the first thing I would really like to do is to unpick the topic of circular beauty, circularity, and what it actually means. And I'd like to come to you first, Jordi, actually, to really look at what is circular beauty and how should the beauty industry be embracing it at the moment?
Well, it's a good question to start. I think that there's a previous concept that there's a life cycle perspective, life cycle thinking that should be introduced. No? That when we talk about sustainability, in general terms, being sustainable, nowadays we talk about circularity. But for me, these two concepts have in common to have a life cycle perspective. So that you have to take into account all the processes that take place from the origin of all the raw materials, the ingredients, but also packaging or energy, and see what happens with them along all the life cycle. So from the cradle to grave. No? And being sustainable, being circular means managing properly all the life cycle stages. So you're not sustainable, you're not circular just by having a circular packaging if you forget the ingredients, or you're not just sustainable by having certified or eco ingredients, but forgetting about the packaging. So it's the full pack that have to be in consideration, and this makes it complex, of course, because companies can do part of this journey on their own, but for sure they need, if they want to be ambitious, if they want to innovate, they need to collaborate and engage in different alliances and collaborations between the different agents on the value chain. So this makes sustainability challenging, but also a growing opportunity for launching new products that or services, because there are different business models behind that give an answer to the growing needs and demands of consumers, but also that go a step forward in front of the regulation that is also putting some pressure here.
Okay, thank you. So obviously the beauty industry has a way to go by the sounds of things, but there's a model there now. And from what I understand, the 4 sort of principles of circular beauty are that we want to work with nature, that we want to, let me just pull up my notes, keep resources in use as much as possible, hence the circular component to it, that we want to design out waste externalities, and that we then want to regenerate natural capital. So we keep that loop going. So you're talking about life cycle thinking, about collaboration, about effectively staying ahead of the legislation. So I want to come to you, Paolo, and ask you how you think the beauty industry then should embrace circular beauty moving forward.
Okay, sorry, Lorraine, because sometimes the line seems to be not really good. Hello?
Can you hear me now, Paolo?
Yes, sorry, but the image is blocked. So, but okay. So yes, I think that when we talk about circularity, I think that this concept has to be interpreted in a more comprehensive way and holistic manner than usual, because sometimes it's just referring to recyclability or some components, and maybe it's not really the case. And I would suggest, as the standard Cosmos is doing, to start from the raw material first, because the raw material has to be, first of all, as much as possible natural and renewable, if possible. And we have even to consider the possibility to use byproducts derived from other industries, and in example, the food industries. And we have some good examples of grape seeds, or I don't know, peats or agrumes or passiflora or skincare or coffee that could be used as feedstock from some processes. And so this sort of integration of different industries within, I would say, a more general concept of biorefinery, where cosmetics is part of more a larger group of industry that are contributing for producing raw material. And then, of course, it's important even to consider that the processes, how the raw material are produced, has to be as much as possible sustainable in order to minimize the emissions of pollutants into the environment. And then, of course, I fully agree with Jordi that the life cycle of product has to be considered even when we are choosing the raw material, because we have to choose the raw material, starting to think a little bit to the end of life scenario and how that raw material could contribute to the biodegradability and, if possible, even to compostability of what remains after the use. And then after the raw materials, we have the processes. And here, I think that it's important to embrace a more green chemistry approach, where the main goal has to be to increase the efficiency of the use of resources, including energy, the reduction of production waste, because that is a way to improve I would say, the circularity indicator of our activities, and even to minimize, I would say, the emissions into the environment again. And finally, for sure, packaging. It's a key factor because we have to recognize that packaging is a very relevant one, but together with the other components of the circular, sustainable cosmetics.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a really valid point there, which is that obviously packaging is the elephant in the room. It's the one thing that the whole beauty industry is talking about, but it's so much bigger than that. The concept of circularity is so much bigger than that. And, you know, as you say, the raw materials, we have to think about whether they're renewable, biodegradable, possibly even byproducts. And there is such an enormous opportunity out there for the beauty and cosmetics market at the moment. So I'd like to come to you, Emma, as someone owning and managing a brand. Can you tell us a bit about how you're embedding circular principles into your business at the moment?
Sure. So first of all, I source all of the ingredients myself. So I know exactly where they come from, what happens to the byproducts of them, whether they are a byproduct of another industry. And basically, as our name suggests, the traceability and the transparency from source to skin. So, for example, we are using a pine extract now. As I mentioned earlier, we're a waterless skincare brand, so it's very challenging for us to be able to create those traditional textures which water contributes to, such as creams, gels, serums, etc. However, we've managed to source this ingredient. It's a brand new ingredient to the market. It has clinical trial results behind it, but it's actually a byproduct of another industry. So we feel very fortunate that we've managed to find that, but it's through a lot of hard work. And I think as a brand, it's perhaps a lot easier as a startup because you can start by ticking off all those boxes from the outset. But when there is a constant demand for further sustainability credentials, which you have to keep adhering to, we're a certified organic skincare brand to Cosmos standards. And one of the reasons why we've chosen to be certified organic is because it's just so much better for the planet. So, for example, Rodale Institute of Farming has conducted studies which show that if just 10,000 farms, medium-sized farms in the US switch to organic farming, it would be the equivalent of taking 1.74 million cars off the road. I've got to look at my statistics, but also 14.62 billion miles. So it stores enough carbon in the soil to compensate for that. We also look at not only the fact that we are waterless in formulation, but also how water is used in our supply chain. So the pine extract I mentioned earlier, for example, is entirely waterless in its extraction process. And as part of our certification with the Soil Association, we are monitored on our water usage. So that's it. It's really going back. And I think one of the super important things as a brand is obviously to make sure that we aren't greenwashing our consumers, but also make sure that we aren't being greenwashed ourselves by suppliers. Because, you know, for example, glycerin, the challenge is trying to find a certified organic palm oil free glycerin. We've managed to find 2, and one of them has a ridiculously high MOQ. So yeah, but it takes a lot to find that kind of information out, a lot of vetting. So
I can absolutely imagine that. It's a shame that Anna from Upcircle isn't here today, actually, because I'm sure she would have quite a lot to say on that point. But just as we round off this topic, one final question I just wanted to ask you, Emma, is I am often told by beauty brands that embedding sustainability into their business is too hard. Particularly the smaller ones who go, you know, I can't afford the more sustainable packaging because it comes in those high minimum order quantities. I don't have the people to follow through the supply chain to figure out exactly where my ingredients are sourced from. All of this, how would you respond to a number of beauty brands who say this at the moment?
I'm a one-person band. and we are stocked in Ocado, Boots, Birchbox, Amazon, Feel Unique, just about to launch with the Hut Group. So we'll deal with some big retailers and demanding retailers. And it's about tenacity. It's entirely possible, and it's extremely stressful at times. But it's about, we started with 3 products. And so it's about being able to manage growth. There was no way that I was going to start the brand unless I had a big retailer on board. So it's about having a very clear business model and not just, going out there and hoping for the best, because you're then wasting all these resources and energy into something which doesn't have any legs. And when it comes to it, when you're trying to communicate to your consumers, there are so many green beauty indie brands out there now that if you can't differentiate yourself, then you're going to be lost in an already crowded market, and your consumer needs to believe in you. And if you can't believe in your own brand and your own ethics and sustainability, then how is anyone else going to be able to believe in that?
Well, hats off to you for doing all of that by yourself. That's very impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to now look at the topic of footprinting, because obviously once you start to look at a circular model, you have to know what your impacts are and what your input, I suppose, is into that circle. So I've got a question for both Paolo and Jordi, which is, with so many types of different footprinting to consider, such as carbon footprinting, water footprinting, ecological footprinting, how should the beauty industry really start to monitor its impacts? And I'm going to come to you first, Paolo, on that one.
Yes, I would say that first of all, to take a proper measures of the environmental performance, it's in any case positive, regardless which kind of approach you prefer. And because I think that, when we start to quantify it, to monitor what we are doing, which is the baseline from which we start, and to monitor and to take a measure, so where we want to go, where we are committed to go, we are doing something good for sustainability, because we are making it into practice, and we are going to even to deliver some positive and practical and measurable effect, because that is the very big difference when we choose a proper indicator. And then, something is related to this term, which are the best indicators, so which are the most useful one, which are the better one, I don't know. But I think that we have to start from one consideration that not all the indicators fit for all purposes and for everything. So we have to be realistic on that. We have to be honest. And I know that some of them are more, let me say, fashionable than others. So something are more easy to be understood by consumers. Some others are a bit more, less interesting, seems to be less interesting. But I think that when a company is choosing some indicators, it has to be considered some characteristics of indicators. It has to be, for example, representatives of the products and the processes we are dealing with. It has to be even scientifically based, credible, because otherwise it's something that, we are talking about nothing. And at the same time, it has to be consistent and comparable over time and over space, because we have even to ensure that our results can be compared with some others' results in order to know, not to make, to make a sort of a game who is more sustainable, but just to allow people to recognize and to better understand how different companies are moving in different way, but all of them aiming to achieve the same goal of sustainability. And then there are some other aspects to be considered, not to make it too technical, but I think that we have even to be careful, because the indicator must be relevant for the intended use, and must be based on data that can even easily be collected by companies, because otherwise, with a reasonable amount of resources, financial and human resources, because if it is too complicated, even it would be not so easy, to use them in a continuous way. And there is another aspect that, in my opinion, is a very relevant. Indicators must be easily understood for the users and even for the stakeholders. And when we come to the stakeholders, to make them, I would say, acceptable or well understood, has to be considered that in a way the indicators should come from a sort of more general agreement. Because if we want to guarantee and to ensure that indicators give the chance to someone to make a comparison, we have together, even with our competitors, to agree on a certain set of indicators that reflect the industry we are working in. Otherwise, could start a sort of, I would say, unfair competition on who is greener than the others. So that is not the game of to be greener. The game is to be good enough to implement a proper strategy, proper measures, considering the peculiarities of each company, the differences in products and processes, but having agreed on, say, a strategy, a model to take proper measures of what we are doing, so that would be easier for the people to understand what. And then, okay, we can call it ecological footprint, we can call it in a different way, but it's something that has been discussed and finally agreed by a large group of people and different stakeholders.
Yeah. So what you're saying is we should have some baseline levels of that we can use to compare apples with apples, basically, throughout the industry. So I'd like to come to you, Jordi, then on that same question. Is there are all these different types of footprints out there, and Paolo obviously makes some very, very good points about the fact that we have to figure out what fits where. But how should the beauty industry really start to monitor its impacts? Because let's be fair, the beauty industry hasn't really been doing so up until very, very recently.
Yeah, you're right. We work a lot on life cycle assessment of products, carbon footprinting. It's kind of projects that we do very often, also with cosmetics and the beauty industry. And I see that even though there are different tools, all of them have in common this life cycle perspective. So life cycle assessment, carbon footprinting are essentially the same tool, but the carbon footprint only focuses on global warming potential and forgets about other relevant indicators. But now is in fashion. So we talk a lot about climate. Now is the priority is climate. So it's fine. I mean, companies and consumers are having this dialogue based on climate. So we are focusing a lot on carbon footprinting. And yeah, but there are some risks. As Paolo said, we need to agree, to have a sectoral agreement on what to measure and how to measure to make the results comparable. Because the first step is measuring, so having these metrics, knowing where I am, where my products are, where do the impacts come from? Are from the ingredients, from the packaging, from the logistics, from the end of life. If you don't know this, you cannot really set a sustainability strategy because you don't know where the impacts come from. Once you have this, and I think is a hard step is setting this strategy and working for real improvement and mitigation of carbon emissions in this case, or other environmental impacts, but setting a strategy for really acting, for changing the way the company operates. And finally, because there's a temptation, there's in the climate, there's a temptation of compensation, of paying some credits for being carbon neutral and then communicating that you're neutral. Just because you are paying somewhere else to plant some trees, and which is fine, but it's not what we are working for. No, we want to improve the beauty industry and doing things better. And there's a temptation of paying and communicating that you are neutral. You are right that we are on the very early stages of metrics in this sector. I've seen progress in large corporations, but these kind of metrics are expensive, require data, and might be difficult to implement by SMEs or startups. It's not impossible, but of course, the detail and the expertise that are needed makes it more expensive. And well, and it's also important, something that is important, that some companies come to us because they want to have their carbon footprint, but they don't even know the energy that they are consuming. They don't have data on the logistics, on the weight of packaging. So there's an initial steps that is collecting this operational data. Having this for me is the first step before going forward. And this is something that any company can do, and SMEs too, and startups too. So they could start from here.
Thank you. I'm glad you actually touched on the topic of carbon footprinting, because I was actually going to ask the question, you know, the risk is that companies will simply offset rather than avoid and minimize. And I'm seeing this already the conversation is being hijacked throughout the beauty industry, and people are going, you know, we've mitigated our carbon footprint by, you know, I think planting twice as many trees as we create in emissions, and that isn't the way forward. So I think there's a big risk here of the beauty industry hijacking that conversation. But just to follow on with what you were just saying before I come to you, Emma, is, you know, how can we move forward as an industry with setting this baseline of what we want to measure, given that time is effectively running out? Because the beauty industry is so late coming to the conversation. I mean, I worked in the oil and gas industry for 15 years before I did this for almost 10 years. And we were doing this decades ago. The beauty industry is so late to the party. How can we move forward with this quickly enough to really catch up?
Well, yeah, I think that it's true that the beauty industry is late, but I don't know, I think it's bad news, but there are other sectors that are even later. Yeah, I think mainly, I mean, regarding carbon emissions and climate, we are talking about externalities. This is an environmental cost that is there, but nobody pays for it. So if we don't have a regulation that puts a price on carbon, then it will be very hard for organizations, for companies to take this into their decision making, because it's voluntary. It's something that you might do if you see the chance, the opportunity, if you think the market is ready, but it's not compulsory. It's not a price. It's free. So this is for me, this is the big problem, that polluting is free until now.
May I add something on that, Lorraine? Because because I'm not completely sure that the cosmetics industry is, I would say, really late. Yes, it's a bit late, maybe, but I have the impression that as till now, at least, chosen a different way to practice sustainability. It was more trying to replace some ingredients, some components, because part of the consumers were really worried about specific aspects. It was I was worried too that you were using something from animal sources, or we were worried to use cosmetics that contains specific ingredients that was claiming to be unsafe, and so it adopted a different approach that was more related to the product, the specific components of the product. So there was not really a huge interest to define what sustainability means. So it was, okay, I changed, I introduced something else. So now we are at the time where the new approach could be integrated into that. Even Cosmos is a standard, a specific standard for product certification. So even Cosmos is a standard that is trying to say you have an alternative. You can make your product more sustainable, replacing or changing your way to produce it. But even Cosmos is now starting to think about how to take a proper measure of that, which is, at the end of the day, the real impact of what we are doing, or what the companies are doing. So I think that it's a way of, become more mature and to understand how we can do something differently. We can provide additional information to the industry, to the consumers, to the stakeholders. So it's something in movement, and sustainability is it's changing time by time. So now it's time to start to think about performances, the effects, and the impacts, the positive impacts that we are.
Yeah, I think it's also being more consumer driven now as well, which is of course why the beauty industry is sitting up and paying more attention. So we've been joined by Anna Brightman from Upcircle. Anna, do you want to briefly just introduce yourself for the viewers? It's wonderful to have you with us.
Hi, first of all, I'm so sorry I've joined this a little late, completely my error, got my dates mixed up. So I've just received a, hey, where are you at? And I was at the warehouse. So I jumped on a bicycle and have hot-footed it over. So forgive me for that. My name is Anna. I am the co-founder of Upcircle Beauty. For anyone who's not aware, our concept is about upcycling byproducts from other industries and transforming them into sustainable skincare ingredients. So we started about 5 years ago with the idea of collecting used coffee grounds from cafes and restaurants. We now are partnered with just over 100 small chain and independents. We've rescued just over 300 tons of used coffee grounds that we turn into scrubs. We extract the oil for our best-selling facial serum. And then we kind of took that idea and broadened it out into all sorts of different products and all sorts of different byproducts as well from varied industries. So we now work with residual chai tea spices left over from brewing chai tea. Those make the scents for our chai soap bars. We infuse byproduct fruit waters that are left over from creating juice concentrates into products like our face toner. We even use maple bark extract, which is a byproduct from the wood industry, and use that in our new eye cream. So 10 byproducts that we're now working with, and every single product that we make is kind of led with a byproduct ingredient in there. And recently we've been navigating formulations with more than one byproduct ingredient in there as well. So starting to get a little bit more adventurous, which is exciting. We are now stocked pretty much globally, which is terrifying. Looking forward to expanding out in a much bigger way into the States in 2021. Our products, beyond sort of being waste fighting in all of their formulations, are also vegan, cruelty-free, of course natural, certified organic where possible. Sometimes that's not possible given our commitment to the circular economy and the intricate and kind of varied sourcing for some of those ingredients. And then of course everything's handmade in the UK as well, in recyclable packaging, which is as plastic free as we possibly can without compromising the actual user experience of those products. So in a nutshell, that's Upcircle, and that's what we've been up to in the last 5 years.
Fantastic. Thank you for the intro. And if anyone wants to hear more about Anna, actually our podcast, I run a podcast called Green Beauty Conversations. We had a discussion, actually went live today. So we're talking about footprinting at the moment. I'd like to come to you now, Emma, to ask you how you have started to measure and monitor the impacts in your brand.
Yeah, so it's been actually a really interesting conversation hearing it from Paolo and Georgie's side, because it transpires that 1 in 5 consumers don't know how to check a brand's sustainability credentials. And so your point with regards to having standards, industry standards, which everyone has to meet to communicate that to consumers and break it down in something that is digestible, I think is something that's really important. There are so many certifications that are cropping up. There's Vegan Society, there's the Leaping Bunny, there's Positive Luxury, there's B Corp. And B Corp, it's an amazing status to have, but it doesn't actually translate to the consumer. And so they're not really able to make that conscious decision at the moment because there's not that the marketing behind it, consumer marketing. And I think that's one of the reasons why the tree planting initiatives get kind of PR'd so much from a brand's perspective, because it is something that the consumer feels like they're in control of. They know that if they are buying something from that brand, then it's being offset elsewhere, by planting a tree, and they can take ownership of that. And I think that's the bit that's really important. We plant mango trees, and from source to skin. So we do. We know the weight of all of our parcels. We have to account for the mileage. We have to account for the mode of transport, where they're coming from, like absolutely everything. And as a one-person band, there is a lot of admin involved. We then have that transparency with our partner. So we actually get pictures taken of the locals planting those trees. And we get regular updates on how they're doing, etc. But from a supply chain perspective, obviously I've spoken about the waterless element, even things like challenge testing. So consumers aren't necessarily aware that challenge testing is typically conducted using animal-derived culture. We only use vegan-derived, plant-derived culture to ensure that it is vegan throughout the supply chain. But there just isn't that that B2C communication there or transparency. We use solar panels as well for our manufacturing. We're certified organic as a brand and as a manufacturer, but we do have a third-party manufacturer who is also certified organic, and we have to have all of their credentials, their environmental credentials as well. So there's a lot of vetting involved in the supply chain perspective, but it's not necessarily what consumers are interested in or have knowledge of. So there's very few. I think it's very easy for brands to pull the wool over consumers' eyes by doing a tree planting initiative. But there is also very little opportunity for other brands who are really trying hard to communicate and get the consumer to understand everything that they're doing as a genuinely sustainable brand.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered the topic of footprinting. In that case, I'd like to move on to the elephant in the room, which is packaging. I mean, it's a discussion that the beauty industry is having a lot at the moment, talking about the fact that obviously, mountains of plastic packaging have been unleashed into the environment over the decades. So I'm going to come to you first, Jordi. How are we going to get this enormous problem under control?
Well, it's very difficult. It's true that the beauty industry, as other sectors, but the beauty industry is using tons and tons of packaging every day that are mainly single use, so that are used once and then discarded. And here the issue, when we work on packaging eco-design projects, we see different approaches. And unfortunately, until now, many companies have seen packaging design, packaging eco-design as a way to optimize the way they were doing things. So reducing the amount of materials, shifting from one material to another that is better for the environment, or environmentally friendly, but those are little improvements, very small, that don't add the improvement that we need regarding the problem, the huge problem that we have. It's doing things better, but not dealing with this elephant in the room. And what I think, or what we've seen, that if you want to really improve your packaging or to rethink the ways you're packaging, you need to rethink the product. You need to rethink the business model. And this is something that the companies are many companies, not all, of course, but many companies are reluctant to do. So if you don't want to change your distribution because it's done through huge retailers that have their standards and the product has to be on the shelf, etc., etc., this constrains the packaging design. So there are no many options, and it has to be one-way packaging because this distribution channel makes it's a burden, it's a constraint for reusable packaging. It makes things very difficult. So, and if you don't want to rethink your product, if you sell shampoo, liquid shampoo, and you will always sell liquid shampoo, you will require certain type of packaging. If you rethink on solid shampoos, then you can rethink the packaging. But if all the context, all the contextual criteria, distribution, business model, product are kept the same, then there's small room for improving packaging. So it's mainly optimization, and it's not enough. No, at this point, at 21st century, this is not enough. And basically, I think that we need innovation, and we need to test new business models based on reusable packaging, based on different collaboration and relationship between producers and consumers. We need different ways of consuming, because if not, packaging we won't be able to improve the design of packaging if everything has to be kept the same.
Thank you. Well, Paolo, I'd like to ask you as well, what are you seeing in terms of packaging innovation with the brands that work with Cosmos, for instance? How are they working to get this problem under control?
Yes, I think that, packaging, it was part of Cosmos standard from the very beginning, but not I would say in a complete way. I mean, it's something that we are going to develop in the coming revision of the standard. So the new version of the standard, the parts dedicated to packaging will be more interesting, because more challenging even for companies, but even for us. Because we have been focused in the past more on the products, on the raw material processes, but now it's the right time to consider the relevance of packaging, because it's evident to everyone. If we only consider the ratio, in terms of the weight, the ratio by mass of the products and packaging, it's evident that it's the big elephant into the room that must be addressed. And I think that the key word that we will adopt within Cosmos would be less. Less is the key word. We have to say less in everything. Less weight, because we have to reduce the weight of materials that we are using, of course. We have to guarantee to ensure the properties of the packaging, because the packaging is supposed to protect and to ensure the shelf life of products. So we are not doing the right choice if we are only thinking about packaging and not to its relevant mission, because packaging has to protect the products. By the way, we have to reduce in terms of weight. We have to reduce and to have less materials, less type of packaging for the same products, because in cosmetics, we all know how relevant is cosmetics in terms of communication or marketing. I think that is the peculiarity of cosmetics. It's different from the food industry, where of course the packaging has not only the role to protect the products, but even to communicate something about the product. But in cosmetics, that is stressed a lot. I mean, there is a very relevant part of communication based on the packaging. So when we're saying that the key word for the future addressing packaging is less, that means that we have to find a compromise. Because of course, cosmetics is living about communication. It's something that people I mean, you are not taking a cosmetics because it's the doctor that is telling you to assume, you know, to get a cosmetic. It's something that you like, something that you are expressing yourself through the cosmetics. So I think that is a very peculiar product, and so we have to consider that part of the products. And packaging is an actor that contributes to the communication of products, but we have to accept the compromise to do the same, to do maybe better with less. And at the same time, we are thinking about less. As Jordi said, we have even to think something more. It's not just the product in itself, it's the product, how the packaging is useful for some other aspect of product. The product has to be delivered, there is a logistic behind that. So even in this case, we have to introduce another keyword that is smart design, because smart design is not just using less material, is even redefining the packaging in order to make it more suitable for logistics, more suitable for being in a shelf. I mean, in a way that we can reduce some costs related to these services that are part, in any case, of products. So I think that is something that in Cosmos we are starting to work with. As I said, in the new version of the standard, that part related to packaging will be bigger than the one that we have right now. And I think that these two words will address our work. How to define a less impacting packaging, how to have a more smart packaging. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, because that was actually going to be my final question to the whole panel, which is all about consumption. And I think you've really nailed it there by saying the word less, because I think that's something that's what circular beauty is really all about. You know, we're talking about creating this circle where we keep resources in use, but ultimately it's about how much we put into that circle. And I think I'd like to talk about how much natural capital goes into that, and how we lower consumption from a consumer perspective. And of course, this flies in the face of what we're doing as a beauty industry. You know, the beauty industry, as with most industries, is there to achieve infinite economic growth with finite natural resources. And that is just not possible. The world cannot continue like this. So how do we move to a world where we embrace low consumption beauty, and how do we get the beauty industry on board? And I'm going to come to you first on this, Anna.
Yeah, what a great question. Obviously, as a brand trying to sell products and fundamentally make money in order to survive, whilst being a brand that's entirely centered on minimizing waste and being responsible and conscious in our purchasing decisions, it's definitely a bit of a conundrum. Of course, when people choose to buy from us, one of the main reasons for that is our more general ethos on seeing value in things that already exist, as opposed to this attitude of, you know, taking, using and disposing. And a lot of that is about the communication. If you think about where we were when we started out this brand, my brother and I co-founded it. We were pretty young at the time, you know, full of energy and ideas, but investors and mentors just said, you know, do not even try this. The beauty industry is shallow, it's fickle, and people will turn their nose up to the idea of essentially putting byproducts on their face, on their skin. And the reason for that is that these ingredients are associated perhaps with being lesser quality or less effective, or even going as far as to, you know, be associating them essentially with trash or rubbish. So a lot of it is in the communication from the brand perspective to really hammer home the fact that that's not the case in any way, shape or form. You know, you can take the coffee, for example. We collect that fresh every single day. The level of antioxidants in brewed coffee is shown to be even higher than in fresh coffee. So arguably, it's even better for your skin. So, you know, with regards to that side of, you know, our actually ingredient sourcing and that attitude of basically asking people to stop and reconsider what they're currently viewing as waste. There's that side of things. But then, of course, there's the other side of things, which is designing our products to have more than one function and minimizing our range. We're not throwing out 20, 30 products a year. We are carefully considering our range, making sure that we build it slowly, properly. We plan the products and we design them so that they can be as multi-use as possible. Again, you can take something like our face serum as an example of that. This is a certified organic, 100% natural, 98% organic facial serum made with byproducts, housed in a glass bottle, comes with an aluminium cap refill. You know, we've thought about every single element of this, but then from the actual user perspective as well, it's gender neutral. It can be used on all ages from, you know, 5 years old, not that you would want to 95 years old. And we market it that way as well. It's a facial serum, but it also doubles up as a hair or a beard oil. So the versatility of the products that we are designing are as broad as possible as well. So this is moving away from some of these brands that we see out there who are basically telling consumers that they need a 35-step morning skincare routine and a 20-step evening skincare routine. I get asked about my skincare routine all the time, and people are often shocked by how very simple it is, because it's not rocket science and it doesn't need to be that complicated. If the ingredients are high quality and the brand has really thought about that formulation and can tell you exactly why every single ingredient is in there, then it's going to do numerous things for you. So, you know, that's the way we tackle things. We get asked, of course, as our brand grows, by customers every single day, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? And it's hard to say, I'm sorry. You might actually be looking at maybe 5 years before we start tackling, I don't know, very specific hair care products, or you know, slightly more niche things. Makeup, we get asked about makeup all the time. But for us, in terms of avoiding overconsumption or rushing into things or just creating for the sake of creating because one person's asked you to, it's about, you know, taking your time, quality control, and being able to reason every single thing that you're doing, the traceability of every single ingredient. And, you know, packaging, for example, I think you can make huge strides with something like that, just with simple ideas. But in order to have those ideas, you need to be taking things slow.
Well, thank you for that very honest and open answer. And I'm glad that you don't sell a 25-step skincare regime.
Me too.
Everyone needs that in their life. So Emma, the same question for you, really. I mean, this is so hard as a brand because obviously you exist to sell products. So how does that sit with the circular idea of lowering consumption at the same time?
For sure. So one of our main USPs and ethos is that we are creating efficacious, ethical products, sustainable products at an affordable price point. I used to work for some very big premium skincare brands, and it costs, you know, £2 to make the products, and they'd sell it for plus 100 to 300 sometimes. And you know, that higher price point, yes, it will lower consumption, but it also makes it unattainable for people with lower incomes to make a good choice. And that was the whole premise of the brand, is that beauty should be inclusive, and everyone should be able to afford genuinely organic and natural skincare. Like Anna mentioned, we're very measured in our approach when it comes to new product development. For example, we've just brought out a vitamin C serum, which is, again, waterless. It's got clinically proven results behind it. But it's taken 2 years to develop because the ascorbyl glucoside, for example, that we use, there are only 2 that are Cosmos approved, and one of them is not vegan. And again, we had to do some fishing for that, endured a million different stability tests. But yeah, so we're all about making those products accessible. It's also expensive to create new products. If you're trying to do it properly, to bring out a new product, it's expensive and hard work. So they do need to be measured completely. With regards to packaging, we use glass rather than plastic, but it's of such a catch-22 because obviously plastic has had such bad press, but glass produces more emissions than plastic. We would absolutely love to be a refillable beauty brand, and it's something that I'm constantly looking at how we can do that. But again, it's really hard. I actually inquired with Loop right at the beginning when they were first coming to the UK about whether we could partner up, and it was expensive. It was expensive as a startup. So looking at ways, and as Jordi mentioned, you know, this, or it might be Paolo, the space that is in the retailers that we're with, we have such a small amount of shelf space that having a refillable machine isn't maybe their best use from a commercial perspective. So it's a real catch-22, but again, like Anna, our products are multifunctional. We also develop them according to objectives. We don't bring out, for example, like we wouldn't bring out a facial oil just because it had a different scent. Everything in there has a benefit towards the skin and the objective that the customer is trying to achieve. So, yeah.
Excellent. It's not an easy route. And that's one thing that we often say to people, you know, sustainability isn't a destination, it's a journey. And it sounds like you're both very much on that journey at the moment. So we're coming to the end of our hourly slot. I just wanted to briefly come to you, Jordi, before I'm going to do a quick fire round. So we've got to keep this one fairly short, which is a shame because it's such a meaty topic. But how do you deal with low consumption beauty in your work? How does that work with the clients that you work with?
Well, there's this contradiction, no, that Anne and Emma were saying. So companies sell products, they want to sell more of their products and replace their competitors. But the fact is that the aggregated consumption is growing, so that we are not really replacing, but we are adding new green products on the standard consumption. This is tough, but I think that we could make more progress if there was more dialogue between all the value chains agents, from producers, retailers that are crucial here, retailers, consumers, and end of life and packaging and recyclers, because sometimes we make decisions in the production side of packaging that cannot be recycled, that there's no technology for recycling this kind of packaging. So there's more dialogue, and if there's more dialogue, there's more comprehension, more transparency, and perhaps we can go further.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've come to the end, but I just really wanted to do a very fast quick fire round. So in 1 or 2 sentences, what would you like to see the beauty industry do to embrace circular beauty? And I'm going to come to you first, Paolo.
Very, very, very difficult. I don't know. Before we were talking about using some words, and I introduced less. From one side is a word that I like, as one committed to sustainability. But from the other side, I think that we have to be smart, not to use in the wrong way, because when we are talking about natural renewable resources circularity as a part of an industry that incorporates the message of renewability and circularity within the business, we can do less, not losing nothing.
Okay,
and
thank you. I'm going to cut you off there because we're going to get cut off in a minute. So Anna, coming to you, what should the beauty industry do?
I would like certification bodies to modernize their criteria so that brands like ours, who center themselves on the use of byproducts in the circular economy, aren't penalized for our arguably even more ethical sourcing than other brands who are more readily able to get certifications.
Thank you. Emma?
Mine would be take responsibility. I think everyone needs to take ownership and responsibility of the sourcing and how they're communicating, and I'm going to leave it there.
Thanks. Finally, over to you, Jordi.
Well, as I said, dialogue, and more dialogue.
Brilliant.
And collaboration.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. There will be a networking session on Friday, this Friday, and we hope to see you all there. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue where we talk about using less and making things more circular in the beauty industry moving forward.